Hello, this is Dr. Heo Young-hoon from the Oriental Culture Academy. Today is the second installment of the Sympathetic Empathy Special Series. I will begin the lecture on the topic of a scientific understanding of sympathetic resonance or family lineages, connected by DNA. Recently, regarding the principles of prosperity and sympathetic resonance associated with auspicious sites, there are views that argue they are unscientific, citing the limitations of modern genetics DNA testing. A while ago, a member of the Internet Cafe for the 100-Year Feng Shui Research Institute, which I run, called me and asked this question. Some argue that DNA testing of remains can only confirm paternity up to the parents, and genetic verification is impossible for grandparents or beyond. Therefore, the claim is that traditional sympathetic resonance mediated by genes is a lie lacking scientific basis and is unrelated to good fortune. So the question was what I thought about this. In other words, the argument is that while paternity between parents and children is clearly confirmed by DNA, the amount of shared genes decreases as the generations become more distant. So sympathetic resonance originating from ancestral graves is also a fiction. However, this is a misunderstanding that looks only at fragmentary parts of genetics and misses the massive flow through which life information is transmitted. This is because the true medium of sympathetic resonance lies not in mere individual DNA strands, but in the massive framework of chromosomes that binds them together and sustains them for thousands of years. Genes, DNA, and chromosomes are often used interchangeably, but from the perspective of Feng Shui, it is necessary to clearly distinguish between them. Strictly speaking, it is academically more valid to say that the substantive medium of sympathetic resonance is the chromosome, a massive structure composed of accumulated DNA. However, the term DNA is being used to encompass this meaning for the sake of public understanding and practical convenience. If DNA is the minute information that determines the characteristics of a living organism, in other words, letters then chromosomes are a vast repository that bundles that information together to transmit it intact to offspring, in other words, books. They can be called books. This can be explained through the principles of Qi and Yang, which are core concepts of Eastern philosophy. Chromosomes serve as the unchanging fundamental basis, and the minute DNA genetic information contained within them, expressed in each generation, becomes a dragon. From the perspective of sympathetic resonance, if a channel for the transmission of energy must exist, it can be described as a giant antenna called a chromosome that preserves and passes down ancestral traits as a whole, rather than individual fragments of DNA. While the affinity of individual DNA fragments may decrease with increasing generational distance, specific chromosomes, connecting the direct bloodline of a family such as the Y chromosome, act as immutable mediators whose form and essence remain unchanged, strongly linking ancestors and descendants from thousands of years ago. For example, the Y chromosome is an immutable medium whose form and essence do not change, strongly connecting ancestors and descendants from thousands of years ago. In fact, in 2012, a research team from the University of Leicester in the UK confirmed the identity of the remains of 15th century English King Richard III by comparing them with his direct descendants 500 years later. In this instance, the family lineage was scientifically proven by comparing the massive framework of the Y chromosome, which is passed down intact through the paternal line, and remains unchanged rather than ordinary DNA that has scattered over time. Then, what is the reason why the pattern and magnitude of blessings differ among descendants, even though they receive energy emanating from the same ancestral grave? This can be explained by the difference in frequencies produced by chromosome combinations rather than gene sequences. When humans produce offspring, they undergo a process of meiosis that reduces the number of chromosomes from 46 to 23. At this time, random crossing over and recombination occur, in which the parent's chromosomes tangle together and exchange genetic information. In this way, while the framework of the bloodline is maintained, internal information is mixed, resulting in each descendant having a unique combination of chromosomes that is one of a kind in the world. It is precisely because of this random recombination process that when the ancestral energy that is, energy frequency remaining in an auspicious site is radiated, The results of the resonance vary depending on how strongly the chromosomal frequency possessed by each descendant resonates with that energy. The relationship between these chromosomes and DNA can be perfectly likened to mountain ranges and the flow of Earth energy in Feng Shui. Let's assume that the Baekdudaegan, the massive skeleton of the Korean peninsula, is a chromosome, and the Earth energy flowing along that mountain range can be seen as DNA. Earth energy is formed from the 5 energies of wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, according to the principles of the 5 elements. If we assume that the energies of these 5 elements undergo a cycle of rise and fall, when first departing from Mountain Baekdu, the ancestral mountain, it begins strongly imbued with the energy of wood among the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. However, as the mountain range stretches down for thousands of miles, the energies of fire, earth, and metal rise and fall in succession, and finally, upon reaching Mountain Jiri, the energy of water strengthens and its nature changes and circulates. What should be noted here is that even though the properties of DNA, the energy flowing through the mountain range, are constantly changing and diluted, the backbone of the Baekdudaegan mountain range. In other words, the fact is that the chromosomes and the family bloodline itself remain connected as a single line, completely unchanged. In fact, popularly, there is a tendency not to strictly distinguish between chromosomes and DNA, and to commonly refer to them uniformly as DNA. Consequently, since DNA becomes diluted as logarithms grow farther apart, the superficial argument that sympathetic resonance is false can be sufficiently raised. However, if you understand that chromosomes and DNA are connected in a body and function relationship, I view this argument as nothing more than a narrow interpretation that fails to see the essence of biological information transmission. As long as the immutable antenna known as the chromosome, the backbone of bloodlines passed down for thousands of years, exists, the link of synchronous resonance will never be broken. This chromosome-based principle of synchronous resonance is an important step in combining the genetic continuity revealed by modern science with Feng Shui. Furthermore, I believe that the instantaneous energy exchange between ancestors and descendants, transcending space-time, can be proven more perfectly and clearly through the duality, superposition, and entanglement phenomena of quantum mechanics, the pinnacle of modern physics. The process of elucidating the flow of invisible energy through scientific principles is precisely the right path that traditional Feng Shui should take. I would like to clarify that the content of this lecture was prepared from a Feng Shui perspective, based on a comprehensive review of literature and related materials, and that experts in modern genetics or other fields may hold different views. That concludes today's lecture. In the next part 3, I will return to you with the topics of the limitations of blessings resulting from sympathetic resonance and how many generations blessings persist. Thank you.